Another weekend of college football is in the books, and it was chaotic this week. What a fun weekend of football. I can't wait to talk all about it. So, without further ado, let's get right into it, starting out with Texas at Michigan. I hit the nail pretty much on the head with this one. Texas walked into Ann Arbor and just planted their flag. As I expected, Texas dominated on all sides of the ball. On offense, Texas could really do whatever they wanted, run, pass, whatever. They spread the ball around really effectively. Multiple receivers got touches and made big plays. And Ewers looked like a Heisman contender for sure. And he threw the ball on target. He threw with great pocket presence, and he didn't really make any mistakes. He balled out, plain and simple. Texas actually outrushed Michigan as well, which kind of surprised me. In fact, Ryan Wingo actually got more yards with one carry than Donovan Edwards did the whole game. So that was definitely one thing I did not expect. And Texas just looked like the more physical team. Especially like at the line of scrimmage, they were kind of dominating the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Say what you will about Michigan's offense, which again I will get to that in a second, but their defense was supposed to be their biggest strength, and to me, Texas looked that good offensively, and I don't know if it's because Michigan maybe not what we expected on the defensive line, or if Texas is just really that good offensively, and if they are, yeah, they could definitely make a deep run and be a national championship contender for sure. To me, guys, Texas is back. I'm ready to say it. I'm not saying that they're going to win the national championship, but I mean they're playing at a top 5 level, top 3 level to me. So let's talk about Texas's defense now, and they really clamped Michigan up. This was far less surprising to me because Michigan's offense looked really pitiful last game when they were playing Fresno State. But I at least expected Michigan to have some success on the ground, but they really didn't. Texas held Michigan to under 100 yards on the ground. They forced 3 turnovers. They were able to get a ton of pressure, and they didn't give up a touchdown until garbage time. So, Michigan's offense was not able to do anything against this Texas defense, and Texas looked like the real deal. As for Michigan, I know this is a really hard loss, and let me give you a little secret. It's going to be a hard season for y'all, but I did see some potential with Davis Warren. He had some hype plays. He is a senior, so I don't expect him to be like the future of the program or anything, which is the downside. But there's potential this season. You have a tough road ahead of you. 2 weeks until USC comes in, and there's a lot that needs to be fixed. So if you want to compete in that game, I suggest you guys getting something figured out there on offense. And it does not look like Alex Orji is going to be the guy there. At least he hasn't shown any sign of being the guy there yet. So that's pretty much my feel on that game. Next game is Georgia Tech at Syracuse, and I told you guys in the last video that I was a little less confident in Georgia Tech after seeing what Boston College was able to do to Florida State. I felt like that seeing that game made it a little less impressive that Georgia Tech won by 3 points. But I trusted that in my gut that Georgia Tech was going to be a better team still going forward, and they were going to be pretty good, but I really don't think I should have done that. Syracuse just came to play, and the score makes it look a lot closer to me than it really was. Syracuse really owned this game. What really lost this game for Tech? A variety of things, but one of the things that really lost this game for Tech was that the matchup that I thought was favorable for Georgia Tech with that running back room, that ground game against Syracuse's defense, it wasn't there. Syracuse was able to stop Georgia Tech's running game pretty dang well. Haynes at quarterback ended up being the team's leading rusher for Georgia Tech, and I'm definitely not going to put this loss on him. He basically did everything he could to carry his team. He had 2 rushing touchdowns, and not like 1-yard touchdowns either. Like they were like 30-plus yards, I think. And he made some big throws too, so he definitely played his part. The team just didn't. They just couldn't win the game. Syracuse was a lot better than I think I expected, and Georgia Tech, the matchup wasn't there. The favorable matchups were not favorable for them. And I just don't think that Syracuse's offense, I did not think originally that Syracuse's offense was going to be able to expose the weaknesses in Georgia Tech's defense, which is their secondary. But yeah, I was wrong about that too. Syracuse was picking apart Georgia Tech's defense. Kyle McCord, he played a great game, and his throws looked accurate, and decision making looked really good. And I think Syracuse is a team that's going to go pretty far this year. I know that sounds like an overreaction, but if you look at their schedule, I think you'll see what I mean. They're probably going to make the ACC championship, and that's probably going to be against Miami. That's my pick for the ACC championship right now is Miami and Syracuse, just because I don't think Syracuse is the second best team in the ACC, but their schedule just looks really favorable. I don't think they're going to lose many, if any, really, ACC games. We'll see. So, hats off to the Orange for proving me wrong on this one. Let's see what they look like going forward and if Georgia Tech can bounce back going forward. Next game I have is Arkansas. Oh, sorry for that voice guy. Arkansas versus Oklahoma State. And double overtime. I told y'all this was my game of the week. Everyone had their eyes on Texas and Michigan, but I knew this would be the heater, and it did not disappoint. It's a heartbreaking one for the Hogs because they really did everything I said that they needed to do to get a win here, but special teams ended up costing them. 2 missed field goals and a muff punt is just unacceptable. A game like this, and will definitely lose you games. And they really changed the game here. I mean, you look at the stat sheet, and Arkansas played better in almost every single category. The scenario that I laid out for Arkansas to be able to win in my last video happened. They were able to force Bowman into obvious passing situations. Arkansas was able to really contain Ollie Gordon. Arkansas's ground game was really successful, like I anticipated. Heck, Jaquindon Jackson had 3 times the rushing that Ollie Gordon had. Insane numbers on the ground. Arkansas had possibly the best running back in the country, held to 2.9 yards per carry. Literally everything that needed to happen did happen, but again, special teams fell short, and that was the difference. Arkansas was also a lot less offensively effective in the second half. Oklahoma State made some adjustments to prevent Arkansas from running away with it, and Alan Bowman was able to make throws when it counted. Oklahoma State had to lean on him, throw the ball, which is a situation that I think favored Arkansas, but in the end, he stepped up to the task. He did throw 1 interception, but I do not think that Arkansas capitalized on it. And overall, Arkansas looked like a lot better than I expected them to be this year. Oklahoma State still looks to be in a position where they could make and possibly win the Big 12. It's another prediction I think I hit the nail on the head with. I predicted it's going to be a close game that Oklahoma State wins. I did not think that Arkansas was going to play this well and still lose, though. The next game I have is Kansas State at Tulane. And while I was right about Kansas State winning the game, I did not at all think this game was going to go how it went. I really thought Kansas State would control this game, but no, Tulane was in this game all the way to the end. And I mean, Kansas State is the one that had to come back in this game, which is really surprising to me. Honestly, Tulane outplayed Kansas State, and they really deserved this game, or they at least deserved to push it to overtime. There were 2 pretty bad ref calls that I feel like at the end of this game that I feel like really changed the outcome. And I've said this before, it's always really frustrating to see a game so close decided by the refs, especially when it's like a pretty bad call. They called offensive pass interference on a touchdown play that would have tied the game or taken it overtime, and I didn't think that was really offensive pass interference. They did not call defensive pass interference on another Tulane shot to the end zone, which was definitely pass interference. So those 2 calls really hurt Tulane, so that really sucked because, like I said, Tulane was really the better team yesterday. And while technically I was right in predicting Kansas State to win, I think deep down I was actually wrong because this really should have been Tulane's win. And at the end of the day, this game really shouldn't have been in the refs' hands. If it weren't for 2 fourth quarter turnovers, one of them which was a scoop and score for Kansas State, and the other when Tulane was on the goal line going for the touchdown, their quarterback threw an interception. If it weren't for those 2 turnovers, there wouldn't have even been a question. They would have won just outright, or at least tied it. So I can blame the refs all I want for this game, but Tulane also did not perform when they needed to perform. And penalties, turnovers, and bad officiating was the name of the game here. And I think that Tulane was just a victim of it, and I think that Tulane is still in a perfect position to make the playoffs with that G5 auto bid. Their quarterback, I believe his name was Minshaw. He was dotting Kansas State up, and he's a freshman, so if they can keep him there, I think he has a lot of potential to go really far. And Avery Johnson for Kansas State also looked really good. He made some really good improvised plays, and had some really, especially when the pocket collapse, he had some really good plays. He is still not the best passer though, but he makes up for it with his legs, and I think down the road he will get better at passing the ball. The next game I have is Iowa State at Iowa, and yeah, I whiffed on this pick. I don't know what surprised me more. The fact that Iowa State was able to score 20 on Iowa's defense, or the fact that Iowa scored in the double digits in this game. If you watch my preseason Big Ten rankings, I mentioned that I thought that Iowa would be a little bit better on offense and a little bit weaker on defense, and I think that did play out here. The first half was exactly what I expected. Iowa State couldn't score so much as a field goal on Iowa, and Iowa was up 13 points. So, I mean, they were by no means dynamite offensively, but they were able to put up a few scores, and they had that lead at the half. And it's not a defense that you want to really be down multiple scores against. I mean, you don't want to be down at all going into halftime, but Iowa's a defense that if you're down like 13, that's not it's not usually a place you can come back from. But Iowa State did. They opened up a bit in the second half, but this game really looked like Iowa was going to win it all the way down to the final drive. This was a 1-point game, which really stings a little extra when you go back and watch how Iowa did not convert on a 2-point conversion. If they kicked the PAT, this one may have gone into overtime, but at the same time, if they would have made the 2-point conversion, they would have won the game right before the fourth quarter was over. So hindsight 2020. McNamara did play better than I expected for Iowa, but he did still throw 2 picks, so take that with what you will. Overall, this was a pretty great comeback for Iowa State. They found a way to get done, and my hat's off to them. Next game is Tennessee at North Carolina State, and this game is another game that went exactly as I expected it to. Tennessee dominated this game. It doesn't matter what stat you look at. Tennessee won this game on both sides of the ball. On defense, 13 tackles for loss, an interception, 3 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries, and they held North Carolina State to less than 200 yards on offense. Ridiculous. Only 39 yards rushing and 104 passing, 10 first downs. Insane that they were able to hold North Carolina State on defense like that. I mean, and this is Tennessee that we're talking about. This is a team that normally, or at least 2 years ago, had a terrible defense, and they've been slowly getting better. And I mean, I don't know how good North Carolina State is. We saw them play pretty poorly last week, but no matter who you're playing, this level of defensive stats, crazy. And on offense, 22 first downs, 460 total yards, 211 through the air, and 249 on the ground. Tennessee had more yards in either one of those categories than North Carolina State's whole team had. So another just ridiculous stat line. Just a splattering in every sense of the word. And I keep telling y'all, watch out for Nico Iamaleava. He is a problem. Just saying. So we're going to move on now to Boise State, Oregon. And this one is a really tough one, guys, because my upset pick did not come through, but it really should have. Boise State really dominated most aspects of this game. But it was another game decided by special teams. No missed field goals, but kick returns. Oregon returned 2 kicks for touchdowns. And that's just not something that usually happens in games once, let alone twice. And that, along with a bit more poor officiating, I think cost the Broncos here. Boise State had more first downs, better down efficiency, less penalties, and they won the turnover battle, so they really should have won this game. If they would have kicked the ball into the end zone after already getting beat once off a kick return, Boise State would come out on top. But I can blame officiating, like I said, all I want. But it definitely is partially their fault. The ball did not cross the goal line when he dropped it. It should have been a touchback. At the end of the day, Boise State did it to themselves, lighting up those 2 returns. Just unacceptable. But the fact that this game was close, it was pretty much proves what I said about Oregon in the last video, which is that their offense just isn't what we thought it was, at least not right now. The O-line got handled by Boise State, letting up 4 sacks. Dylan Gabriel did play well with what he was given, but the offense around him is really not a playoff contender right now. Their defense also looked pretty vulnerable to this G5 school. You should not be letting up 34 points to a G5 school. It's just not what championship contenders do. And Boise State's running back, Ginty, my goodness, that man can run and he can break tackles. He was responsible for 3 touchdowns for Boise State. He was, I was going to say he's the difference in this game, but since Boise State lost, I mean, he wasn't really the difference, but he would have been if they didn't let up those 2 touchdowns. And I think that Oregon has a lot of fixing to do. Their schedule doesn't get too difficult until they Ohio State, so we'll see if they can shape up by then. But for now, Tulane and Boise State look like real contenders for that G5 auto bid playoff spot. So now, there were a few games that I didn't cover in my last video, but I did predictions on my socials, which is why you guys should make sure you check out my socials. I add more predictions there. So those games include Colorado and versus Nebraska, Cal versus Auburn, and Kentucky versus South Carolina. So starting out with Colorado, Nebraska, also a game that went exactly as I expected it to. Colorado's defense was just vulnerable, as we thought. Nebraska was able to run and pass pretty effectively. Dylan Raiola is performing very well in his freshman season at Nebraska. The Huskers' offense couldn't get, or Colorado's offense couldn't get anything going against the Cornhuskers' defense. It was a statement win. I had very little doubt about Nebraska in this game. I bet them with the over, or not the over. I bet them plus the points. I mean, I knew they were going to cover. I think they're one of the better teams in the Big Ten this year, and I really wasn't high on Colorado. I think that Nebraska already had a great defense, and they added a competent quarterback, and voila, a solid team is there. Colorado has some stars, but they don't really have a team, man. I just don't think they're going to be any different than they were last year. And the last game that I had and the next game I have on my list of things I put out on the socials was Cal at Auburn. I picked Auburn to win this game. I really thought Auburn would be able to make positive strides this year, but Peyton Thorne ended up being the thorn in their side. He's just straight up bad. Auburn contained Jaden Ott and played pretty solid defensively given the circumstances, but it's really hard to win when your quarterback throws 4 interceptions and there's a fumble that you also don't recover. Cam Coleman was Auburn's leading receiver, which is no surprise to me. Cam Coleman is a beast despite being a freshman, and that's another part of the problem. I mean, mentioned that he's a freshman. Auburn had way too many freshmen starting in this game because they had to. They don't have the luxury like Georgia does to not put freshmen on the field and let them develop. So they have to learn fire. And honestly, Cal didn't really do anything special, but they just waited for Auburn to hand them the game, and Auburn did exactly that. So Auburn lost to Cal at home, which is pretty embarrassing, but that's what it is. And the next game, the last game that I predicted on the socials was South Carolina at Kentucky, and I really thought Kentucky was going to roll South Carolina, but quite the opposite ended up happening. Lenore Marcellus looked really good, despite Kentucky generating a decent amount of pressure. The game, honestly, was pretty close for most of the game, and South Carolina really opened it up later in the second half. South Carolina held Kentucky to less than 50 yards passing. That's crazy, forcing Kentucky to be pretty one-dimensional. Kentucky looked dead in this game, and South Carolina looked like they are figuring themselves out really quickly. Definitely a bounce-back game for them, and especially after almost losing to an FCS school the week before. And Kentucky's got to figure something out because they play Georgia next week, and I think my dogs are going to roll them. And now for the upsets, and this is where it gets really fun because I think everyone knows where I'm going to go here first. Just one upset that trumped them all. NIU took down Notre Dame. You heard me correct. NIU took down Notre Dame, and NIU was the better team too, which was the crazy part. It wasn't some fluke win. NIU won this game straight up. They had more yards on the ground and through the air. It was a letdown game for sure for Notre Dame, but that's an understatement. It was embarrassing. So happy for NIU and their head coach, though. That post-game interview was full of emotion and heart, and it's just what the sport's all about, so I really like seeing that. And as for Notre Dame, I don't really know where you go from here. I mean, that young offensive line got exposed. I expect that it'll continue to be a problem going forward. Riley Leonard also got exposed. It was really a really tough look for the Irish, and I don't really know what else to say about it. I don't really need to get into stats and everything because NIU beat Notre Dame, and what else is there to say? There's no excuses here. I mean, especially since the stat sheet shows that NIU played better the whole game. I mean, it was ridiculous. I could not believe it was reminiscent of what that Appalachian State Michigan upset was. Crazy. So, yeah, that was pretty much the big upset. Some smaller upsets here: Illinois versus Kansas. Illinois, obviously, is better than I expected them to be. I think they might have been at the very bottom of my Big Ten preseason rankings, but I was wrong. Luke Altmaier looked a lot better than I expected. Kansas kept shooting themselves in the foot. 4 turnovers, 3 of which were interceptions thrown by Jalen Daniels. Unacceptable. And other than that, Kansas won the stat battle, but it really didn't matter in the end. Illinois took this game. Next, Michigan State, Maryland. I was higher on Maryland this year. I had them higher than most, and now I think I look like a little bit of a clown. Michigan State won this despite Aiden Childs throwing 3 interceptions. Maryland got pretty good quarterback play in this game, solid passing stats, but Michigan State just looked better. They had a better team. So not much else to say about that. SMU lost to BYU. I kind of see this coming. SMU, the last 2 games, has not been very impressive. Their offense struggled. They didn't know who their quarterback was going to be. They played 2 different quarterbacks. The one that everyone expected to start did not, Preston Stone. Everyone was touting as this really great quarterback, and even me as well. He did not play very well, and they had to bring in another guy, and he just he didn't play that well either. Neither of them looked particularly good. SMU got out physicaled. They didn't really excel at anything. BYU wasn't really impressive to me either, but they got the win, and I think this just really shows that SMU is still playing like a G5 team. They're not playing like a power conference team, although their rest of their conference is not really playing like power conferences teams either, so I can't really say anything. Also, Duke versus Northwestern. These are the games that are not really upsets. These are just games that I also watched. I'm not going to talk about these much because they're pretty. They were not super nationally relevant games. They were very fun to watch. At least this next one I'm going to talk about was, but they were just kind of smaller games. Duke Northwestern, very fun to watch. Like I said, Northwestern was winning it for most of it, but the Blue Devils came out on top in overtime. Neither team looked particularly good, but like I said, Duke came out on top. And yeah, I think these are 2 teams that are both looking to be bowl game teams this year. They're kind of on that bubble, like the bowl game bubble. So I think this was a big win for Duke into getting that bowl eligibility. So we'll see if Northwestern can pick that up later, and obviously if Duke can continue and pick that as well. Arizona State versus Mississippi State. Arizona State pretty much had this one under control for most of the game, but they did try to choke it away at the end. Not really an upset, like I said, but I don't really feel like either of these teams were that good. I think they were both pretty bad or mediocre. So I think Mississippi State was pretty properly rated where I had them in the preseason ranks towards the bottom of the SEC. I think they had them at the bottom, actually. Maybe not, though. I'll have to go back and check. Also, Washington State beat Texas Tech. Texas Tech looks pretty bad this year. I didn't really get a chance to watch that game, but just the score, losing to Washington State by that much, kind of crazy. Definitely towards the bottom of the Big 12 this year. So I had Texas Tech a little bit higher. Did not end up panning out already because they almost lost to an FCS school, went into overtime with them, I believe, and then they lost to Washington State by a pretty large margin. So not super impressive. Now, speaking of unimpressive, I'm going to talk about some teams that did win but looked pretty bad doing it. Alabama beat USF, but and that score looks a lot wider of a gap than it really was. This was a 1-point game going into the 4th quarter, and USF was in position to take the lead, and they just crumbled when they were forced to throw. USF was running the ball all of Bama's defense. Bama was really struggling. That offensive line looked really unimpressive without Proctor there. Their defense was not as stout as I thought it would be. They were getting ran on despite knowing that USF was going to run the ball because they just couldn't pass it. So definitely not a good look for Alabama here. I think that USF is better than people make them out to be, but whenever your team is one-dimensional, you should not be playing close, or you're just not a power conference team, you should not be hanging in there with Bama like that. So that was pretty interesting. We saw the same thing happen last year, though, and Bama made it to the Final Four. But I think this one's a little bit different because they had Milroe for this game, and that team was not, actively going out of their way to play negatively because they didn't have the quarterback that they wanted in the game, which is what I feel like happened last year. So Anyways, moving on, Penn State's a close one to Bowling Green. Their defense just isn't the same without Manny Diaz. Bowling Green actually had more passing yards, and Bowling Green was within a touchdown despite losing the turnover battle. I believe Penn State had to come back and win this game as well. Really poor showing for Penn State. I think they played really well last week. Made me look kind of dumb in my upset pick, and then this week they almost fall to Bowling Green. Crazy. Oklahoma barely beat a bad Houston team. Now, this is still a power conference team, but barely, and they really shouldn't be. Offensive line continues to be an issue for Oklahoma. The run game wasn't there. The pass game was just okay. Oklahoma looks pretty rough this year. I don't think they're going to perform very well when they get into SEC play. So I definitely think that Texas is going to be the better of the two new additions coming in to the SEC this year. But that's pretty much all the big games from this weekend that if I missed any, please let me know, and I would talk about them in the next video. But I hope you guys liked watching this one. Please like, comment, subscribe, follow me on the socials, and yeah, I will come back next week. Not next week, my next video, and I'll be predicting the next games for week 3, and also giving you my updated top 25. There's a lot of movement there, and I think there's a lot that you guys are surprised about. But yeah, that's it for this video. Have a great one. Peace.